than, talking about Peyton and like the party. I mean, I would love to hear your thoughts on the character Peyton.
So it's hard for me to like feel or have views on a character, especially Peyton. So since I'm not a girl, I don't know how that angst differs from male. Uh, I can see Nathan and I can see Lucas and I can kind of see parts of me as a teenager because even them being so different, there's
Mm-hmm.
always qualities that like as a young teenager you can kind of relate and be like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe it wasn't so good at math, or oh yeah, maybe like I didn't have the best home life. um but like it's really weird to see Haley, Peyton, Brooke, and they're also different from each other's, yet they kind of feel like they're going through the same
Mm-hmm.
situation. So it's really hard to like sometimes look at them and be like, okay, like I can, it's not that I don't feel for them, but I can't say, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly what she's going through. So
Yeah.
it's hard for me to understand. That's why as you keep watching the show and they give you a little bit more of explanation on their background, like Peyton doesn't want to really be a cheerleader. She kind of is doing it for just the fact that she thinks she has to do it. But you
Mm-hmm.
can see that Brooke is really into cheerleading, and then you have Haley, who's just very smart, very nice and sweet. So it's like you get all these three women that are very different from each other, and you kind of throw them in there, and then you just have Nathan and Lucas, and that's it.
Yeah. The heightened point of Peyton just being rude and bitchy. There's a difference between being, broody, angsty, emo, whatever, and just being a bitch. Everybody like hated the character of Peyton so bad. They did that to give some likability to her because
Okay.
people hated her so much. Every time she has like a conversation with Lucas or Haley or anything, I feel like she always just like is bitchy. Like he comes over to be like, "Are you okay? Like what's going on?" And she's like,
Yeah.
"I'm just a, riddle wrapped in a mystery inside a bitch." Like,
Yeah.
and
I
he's like,
feel
"Okay."
yeah. So it's really strange. I never got that bitchiness
Hmm.
feel of her. It just felt like somebody that was very misunderstood and didn't know how to portray the fact that she wants certain things out of life. Like, there's at one point that she's like, I don't need you advocating for my feelings, and I'm pretty sure I don't even need you. And it's
Hmm.
like, yeah, because you don't you don't know me, but at the same
Hmm.
time, like he wasn't doing it out of ill will, but she doesn't know anything else. Like
Hmm.
all she knows is the way Nathan was treating her. So at the same time, it's like I can see where her wall is being built, and it's like by the
Hmm.
relationships she had, and like Brooke is, I don't think she's a bad friend, but you can guess that since they're so different, she kind of has to put those walls up to be like, if I don't share your same interests, are we gonna still be cool? And I
Hmm.
feel like that's why when she saw Nathan and Haley, she kind of was like, oh, I need to tell her what
Hmm.
she's in for because she's not gonna go through what I'm going through, you know?
Hmm. Well, and
So
I think too, like again, like we even the good scenes that we get, especially with Peyton and Haley, because I feel like she is really nice to Haley. They like a lot of the same music, and then she like ends it like she's like, "Oh, be careful," like whatever, blah blah blah. You
yeah,
say a lot without saying a lot, without saying anything or whatever.
going
And
back to those going
like,
back to those insecurities and not knowing how to express them, because
hmm.
even when he comes back from crashing her car, she tries to confront him, and he basically was like, well, you do know that I took it and you know it's a lie, but are
Hmm.
you coming back? And she's like, no, that's exactly
Yeah.
not doing. So I'm pretty sure it feels like a lot of the insecurities that she has from her relationship, the backstory that we're going to get in the future,
Hmm.
it's making her the way she is. And it's good that they started, in my opinion, that backstory early, because if I
Hmm.
feel like if that continued and you just don't know why she's the way she is, it would have
Hmm.
turned out worse that maybe she would have been written off in an accident, like at the end of season one,
100%.
instead of
100%.
seeing that progression through all the seasons that we got of the character.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for situations like this, like, yeah, she is the way she is.
Thought about this until this last time that I was watching. They were both really mean. Like she calls him
Yeah,
stupid a lot. Like they both equally yell at each other and like throw insults. And it's just like the perfect example of like such a toxic relationship.
kind of like that perks of being a wallflower quote that says like you accept the love that you think you deserve.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it is a lot of that. Like Nathan accepts being called stupid because his dad is his dad and how he treats
Mm-hmm.
him. And he thinks that he is stupid for not having good grades, and the only thing that he's good at is basketball because that's what his dad tells him. So it's kind of like, well, you take what you think you deserve, and they thought they deserved each other at that
Mm-hmm.
point, and that's why Nathan thinks that it's acceptable to treat her that way. Well, if you treat me that
Mm-hmm.
way, I can treat you that way, and that's our relationship,
Yeah.
and whatever.
Well,
That's
and
what
I
they're
think it's
used to.
interesting too. There's not a single sweet moment between Peyton and Nathan.
Yeah,
Every single time they're fighting, like you don't like I don't see a reason why they're like staying together or like how they got together. They just should have been together because they're both in the same group of friends and like
yeah.
that just is what should have happened. Or up until I would say this episode, then they start throwing all of this horrible clothes and like looks on Haley, I think to make her look more like nerdy and like weird. They had gotten a note from the studio or something that like Haley wasn't like frumpy enough. So they like threw that ugly hat on her.
Disagree there. I love the hat. I thought the hat was cute. I thought it looked great on her, and the hat served a great moment in the
It
episode.
did. Gray bucket hat.
Yeah,
I guess the like running joke around set about the hat was they called it the penis hat. And like it had mushrooms on it and they hated it. Then they like throw that ugly poncho on her
yeah,
and all of that. She's wearing like a jean jacket and a t-shirt and like that ugly hat and then Peyton's wearing like a really cute like turtleneck like
yeah,
tank and then Brooke's wearing like a really cute blouse. Like it just is like funny the differences. You know what I mean? Like Haley does not care.
yeah,
And I love that. Party was pretty well done. I didn't think it was it was pretty believable and like normal, like playing Never Have I Ever, whatever. And I think too, you see the start of Haley and Nathan. I think the conversation and the relationship is real.
yeah. I think he did it very with the intention of hopefully messing with Lucas. It was kind of like I feel like in his mind it was like a 2-for-1 type of situation. Maybe I get some
Mm-hmm.
tutoring out of it. Maybe it pisses him off. But I feel like even though it was ill intentioned and he wanted to get something out of it for his own good, like hurting Lucas and getting the tutoring, it felt the most honest that Nathan is as a character throughout the show,
Mm-hmm.
and like it just seems sincere, and he does it with like his mugginess on him, but everything that he says to Haley always feels genuine, and I feel like from that vulnerability is where their relationship starts to blossom.
I don't know if it's the next episode or a couple after when they're tutoring and he's like, you and I have talked more than me and Peyton ever did
Yeah,
in like the years that we were together. I don't know if it's because him and Haley started kind of as friends, like, in a platonic
yeah,
way, but just like right from the bat, like she did not take his shit. They, he would really open up to her like from the start.
yeah,
And even in the car saying, I really can't have anyone else tutor me because they will make me feel stupid on purpose,
yeah.
you
I
know?
feel like it was that exactly what you just said. He to an extent felt like she was below him enough that he could go to her and maybe it wouldn't be like a big deal. But if he went to anybody else, it would be like, oh, like this is a this is clearly like you're dumb or like you're stupid.
Mm-hmm. The videotape was so weird. Like, why, first of all, why would Dan keep that? I mean, I guess because he won prom king or whatever. But like, why was it just sitting around that Nathan was like, "Ooh, yeah, let's pop this in."
I thought of that too, especially like now if we're kind of like going back to that conversation we were having about nobody knew about this ever.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of weird how it just seems like a thing that was placed in the episode to create a catalyst,
Yeah.
but it's like it created a moment where
And then
he
he has
just
to be like,
walked in at
that's
the
my
perfect
mom.
moment.
He didn't have to tell anybody that was his mom. He could have just been like, yeah, I don't know, let's turn it off. Like,
Yeah, like
it
I
was
mean,
just so weird.
when I'm thinking about it, like yeah, he didn't have to say it, but more than likely Nathan was gonna say, "Oh yeah, it's not your mom."
Yeah.
So it was created with that intention. It was really weird that it was thrown there, but like just with the hat being placed in the perfect place to create that catalyst of him finding out, it created that moment where like Payne is realizing, oh, Dan probably treated her like that, and now I'm
Yeah.
Karen in this situation. Am I going to end up like her? So it did
Hmm.
create a moment where like
For
eventually
Peyton. Yeah.
she's going to break up with him due to this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I was just like, okay. Like,
and it's really
um,
weird because I wouldn't want my friends to be like going through my VHS of my family
no.
Disney trips and
It's just like, and you're at a party. Like, that was probably the only thing about the party that was unrealistic is no one's gonna be like, let's pump in this homemade VHS.
no, and the worst part is not even that he's looking through the VHS, is that he's looking through the VHS trying to find porn. And he makes a comment about it. He's like, Ethan, your parents don't have any good porn in here. And I'm like, do you want to
Yeah,
just
like
watch porn at
at
the
the
party with all
party,
these?
Tim is a character that definitely like he shines more in season two, but he definitely gets a build up. And unfortunately, he after season two is like not in the show anymore because they didn't want to pay the actor, basically, was what happened. But he gets little one-liners and like he's like Nathan's best friend and he becomes one of the funniest characters on the entire show. Why would they ask them like what's your secret or like how have you guys stayed together? And he's like, oh, good sex. Like, that would never have happened. And you don't get
Now
a speech when you win prom king. And I think it was the catalyst too for Lucas being like, oh, like they were really together. Like I do get his frustration, but at the same time, like Karen is such like an independent, strong woman. Like she's absolutely right when she's like, anything that we would have gotten from him, he would have felt entitled. Lucas was his property, is what it
yeah.
was, you know? And she made the right choice. I mean, it was probably a really, really hard choice, but like they definitely scaved out way better than, Deb and Nathan.
And not even in the situation of like something money wise, because that's all that Lucas sees at the moment. He's like,
Hmm.
you could have definitely we could have definitely had more if you would have
We could have just
come
lived
out and
more
told him.
comfortably. Yeah.
Yeah. But when you think about it, is if even if he would have been in Lucas's life, would Lucas end up like Nathan? You know, because
Hmm.
when you think about it, the reason why Lucas is the way he is because he had such a nurturing character in his life in his mom. So if he would have had somebody like Dan who grows up with those regrets and that way of being, would he have just ended up just like Nathan, or would he have been able to have that nurturing side to him?
So if they would have been with Dan, then Keith, they would have never had Keith in their lives the way that they did. Keith basically was Karen's husband and Lucas's father without those titles. Like she was his partner in raising Lucas.
Yeah,
That was Lucas's dad, and Keith is such a great character and person. Lucas becomes, in my opinion, one of the worst characters on the show, but the good parts of Lucas are all from Keith
yeah,
and Karen, but like, what kind of man to be and all of that stuff. He for sure gets from Keith. And like his childhood, like he tells so many childhood stories of Keith and him, and he would have never had any of that from
yeah,
Dan, ever. Nathan doesn't have a good story from
yeah.
childhood of Dan. It's hard to see Nathan as a bad boy character and like when he's not a good guy. And it's hard for me to believe it because I just feel like James Lafferty, who plays Nathan, he just brings such a likability to him that it's hard for you, even when he does like a face or like a mean face, like it's hard to believe that in him.
I as of this episode, like if I'm watching from the beginning without thinking about what's
Mm-hmm.
gonna come, it's really hard to like Nathan because
Mm-hmm.
as a character, there's no other redeeming quality to him other than feeling bad for him that Dan is
Mm-hmm.
his dad, you know? And going into the episode, you see him, oh, maybe let me invite him to the party. And you're like, okay, how bad can this be? We know it's going to be very bad because he's doing it
Mm-hmm.
with that intention. But the part that for me was like, this is not a good person. And maybe there might not be any redeeming qualities to him. It's not
Mm-hmm.
even when he's messing with Lucas, it's when he crashes Peyton's car. And then when confronted by Lucas, hey, this is a crime, he's like, I'll just lie and Tim will cover for me. And
Mm-hmm.
it was Peyton's fault. That was messed up. And
Yeah,
like at
that
that point,
scene
you're
was
like, you're
bad.
just a horrible person. There's nothing that you can say right now to make this situation work in your favor and me liking you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and another testament to Keith of, Keith finds out and he's like, oh, hell no.
The funny part about that scene in the episode is like Deb tells Dan, and he's like, "Well, is he okay?" Like, yes,
Yeah.
okay, but do you know what happened? Is
Mm-hmm.
this situation? And he's like, "Oh, like he can't even believe that that happened.
Mm-hmm.
He can't
Well, I
fathom
think
that
I
something
loved
like that
that
would
scene with
happen."
Deb and Dan because Deb's like, so is it common for Nathan to be out all night and you just let him do it?
Yeah,
Well, I can't come down
it's a
too hard on
responsible
him, blah blah
kid.
blah. And she goes,
Yeah,
oh, okay, well, do you know what our son did last night? I really loved that scene a lot. And then Nathan comes in and they're like,
it was really interesting to see how in their minds things would have been resolved because after that scene Nathan just goes and he's like, how long is it going to take to fix the car? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, how much money is it going to cost? He's like, a lot. And then he's like,
mm-hmm,
just send me the invoice. And he's like, no, that's not how things work in real life.
mm-hmm,
You don't get to send an invoice and this is just
yeah,
fixed.
yeah. And that whole thing and Keith, I love when Keith is like, play nice girls. Like,
Yeah.
I think Keith is the best character on the show. He's my favorite. And he has a lot of ups and downs. He has flaws. He's not just the hero all the time, the nice guy all the time. I really love Keith. And I love Craig Sheffer, who plays Keith. I think he's really great, and everything he brings to the character makes Keith what it is. The scenes in the shop are like some of my favorites between
Yeah.
Keith and Lucas, and like even when Nathan comes in, Keith trying to facilitate a relationship with Nathan and Lucas. And
Mhm.
that's something else that just blows my mind, that Dan is so like, I would understand him not wanting like Karen and Deb to be friendly, but to not want your sons to like each other is like
Yeah.
insane to me.
I mean, if he's not acknowledging Lucas, he basically, like I said, he saw Lucas and Karen as being inferior to him. They don't have the same lifestyle. They don't have the same amount of money. So in
Mm-hmm.
his mind, the person that he has invested the most time into is Nathan, and having those abilities in basketball coming from somebody that you didn't put any effort into. That's why he's so hell bent on having Nathan outshine Lucas in the basketball court. And it becomes
Mm-hmm.
a clear issue when he puts up that final basket.
It's funny too, Moira, who played Karen, is pregnant in real life. So they have her holding all those big books for like fixing the pipe like in front of
Yeah.
her stomach. Um
I didn't notice that, to be
and
honest. I wasn't aware of that.
yeah, you once you know it, you can see it. They put like a
Yeah.
big bag in front of her, they put big books in front of her. I love Deb coming into the cafe at the end and just being like extending that olive branch stuff with Dan and our boys, but like that's not us.
Mhm.
I thought that was very nice. And
It's very
again, you
interesting.
see the start of their relationship.
Yeah. It's very interesting how these conversations with women start and they feel very tense and they feel like they're going to be very confrontational. When Peyton kind of addresses Haley feels like it seems like it'll be very confrontational,
Mm-hmm.
and then it ends up not. And it's
Mm-hmm.
in a way it's sweet because she's kind of warning her about Nathan's
Mm-hmm.
ways. But even with Karen and Deb, you can see how she's kind of like taken aback by her being in the shop, and then she's like, it's this amount of money," and she hands her and she just grabs it, and you're like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
this is gonna be a catty fight." And then
Mm-hmm.
she's like, she tells him, "Tell him not to spy on me. If he wants to say something, he can come here." And she's like,
Yeah.
"No, this was me trying to be genuine and come to you and tell you that I don't have any of these animosities." And it
Yeah.
turned into a nice conversation between two people that don't have anything in common except this bad situation.
Mm-hmm. But kind of have a lot in common. I mean, they both got pregnant at the same age,
True.
and they both were involved with Dan and had him do the same thing to both of them,
Yeah.
which I think again as their relationship blossoms, you you see that. Like you get introduced to that of these women couldn't be more separate, but then also they couldn't be more similar,
Yeah.
Having something like that happen, like that's a big thing that they both went through, being 18 and having a baby, 19 having a baby. I think Deb, who's played by Barbara Allen Wood, and Karen, who's played by Moira. I think they both just have such good chemistry in scenes and they act
Yeah.
so well together. So it's really fun to see that relationship, bloom over time. Everything that Haley brings out with Nathan over time, like he
Yeah.
gets that from her. Like it's
Yeah.
not from Dan. And I think the only downside to Deb as a mom and everything is just I think Dan was a lot and she didn't want to deal with Dan.
Yeah.
And so it was just easier to just, travel and work and not have to deal with that. But she should have put that effort in to be like, you know what? I'm taking me and Nathan out of this situation or
Yeah.
away from him, or even though it would have been a fight. And like you see as time goes on, like it is a fight and all of that. I think it's a fight she should have had.
Yeah.
Peyton gets her car back, and then Peyton and Nathan break up at the end of this one, right? Yeah.
Yeah. She confronts Tim about the car.
About the car.
Yeah.
And then she finally breaks up with him and she brings the Haley thing up. And she's like, "What's going on with you and that girl?" And he's like, "Nothing." And she goes, "Well, if it is nothing, you're an ass. And if it's not nothing, you're still an ass." Like,
Yeah. I mean, I kind of understand to an extent. Like, if he wasn't honest with her, and
mm-hmm,
I could see why she would feel like it's kind of a betrayal, because if there is nothing, you should have come to me and say, "Hey, I need tutoring. She's the best tutor in the school.
mm-hmm,
This is what it is."
yeah,
The situation would have been misunderstood, but the fact that you hit it and then you're like, "Huh, it's nothing,"
mm-hmm.
it's going to create a sort of painting in her head that I
Well,
can
and
see
I
why she
think
would be upset.
Peyton's kind of been the only one in that group that has talked to Haley, gotten to know her and whatever so
Yeah.
far. So I think that she knows that like Haley is a good person, a good girl, like, and I think she's like, if you're playing with her to get to Lucas, because she knows Nathan,
Yeah.
she's like, that's beyond messed up. And I
True.
think that that was the main issue. I mean, and they'll go in to talk about this, but like Nathan and Peyton break up all the time and get back together because the relationship is toxic
Yeah.
and rocky. So that's why she's like, no, we're done. He's like, okay, I'll call you tomorrow. Like,
Yeah.
when you're not so PMS.
I hated that joke.
But
And
well, I actually really think it's funny. And later on, whenever she's acting bitchy, they call her Peyton Marie Sawyer. That's not her
yeah.
actual middle name, but because it's PMS. So I do think
Yeah.
it's funny in regards to her name. I think that that's
Okay.
why, you know what I mean? They say that. And then Karen fixes the plumbing and her and Lucas have that good talk. I basically just put a note like money equals dance control. Karen is so smart. Like at 18 years old, like she was
Yeah.
so smart and did the absolute right thing. And oh, I love when Peyton's breaking up with Nathan and she's like, no, if you haven't noticed, Nathan, normal sucks with us.
Yeah.
Because he's like, oh, I'll call you tomorrow. And it'll be back to normal. I'm also glad that the Peyton and Nathan was like very short lived.
Yeah, I mean, you
There's
like I
not
said,
really a lot you can take that, you know?
yeah,
The music this episode, Empty Apartment, is like one of my favorite songs. And
yeah,
they play it in this show like 100 times, and this is the first time we hear it. The music in this episode was really music in almost every episode's really good, but this one was
yeah,
really good because last episode's music was a little bit meh, meh.
yeah,
Um, but also when Lucas, this is where I start to really hate Lucas's character. Like when he gives Haley the hat back and he plays that whole game of like, at least we can be honest with each other. And then she's like, yeah, at least. And then he's like, I found this in Peyton's car. Like Lucas or Nathan took you home. And he acts all like gross with her. It's just so annoying. And
yeah,
it's he continues to do this as like her and Nathan's relationship progresses, but
yeah.
it's just like who cares? Like you didn't sit there and go, "Can I talk to Peyton?" Like I think I'm going to
Yeah.
talk to Peyton. Like you're not going to ask her permission, so why should she ask your permission to do anything?
There's always that idea of like the good guys always have their issues,
Mhm.
and like they try to present him like, oh, he's the emotional one, he's the one that he's a good guy. And it's like, is he though? Like, because at the end of the day, neither him or Nathan are even the good guys. Like you end up
Mhm.
rooting for people like Brooke and Peyton and Haley. So
Mhm.
it's like that situation
Well,
where
I
you start
think
seeing,
then,
oh,
you know,
maybe
when
it's
you
just
get
the
in,
guys that suck just all around.
yeah, when you get introduced to Mouth and Mouth becomes more of a prevalent character, that truly, that's the good guy. Like he
Yeah,
really is the one who's like the good guy. And Nathan does become, you know,
yeah,
really, really good. But
he redeems himself.
Lucas, man, this is the start of his spiral down to being, again, in my opinion, the worst character on the show, apart from Dan.
Yeah,
Because I think it's because he does present as a good guy and he tries to act like he's a good guy, but like in actuality, he's like really not. The ending song, Matthew Ryan returned to me. I thought that was really good.
yeah.
So we always end the episodes with like the theme song, I don't want to be, but
Okay,
we do I do want to be and I don't want to be. So like something that you liked about the episode, something that you didn't like about the episode.
okay. Something that I really, really liked is the name of the episode is "Crashed into You,"
Mm-hmm.
and I love that it was so kind of on the nose, kind of really early 2000s that there was a crash in the episode,
Mm-hmm.
and I kept thinking about it, and I'm like, that's so early 2000s, so kind of on the nose, like crash on you, and we have a crash in the car. Like,
Yeah.
I really love that. Something that I didn't like was the whole way that Lucas came to handle the situation with Dan and his mom. It just it I've never understood that even when I watched the whole show, because yeah, you didn't have your biological father in your life, but at the same time you had all these great opportunities and you had all these great people, and at the end of the day money isn't everything. um, but I do also understand that he's young and he's a teenager, so at that point people are always telling you you need to finish school to get a good job, to make good money, to get a good house and a good car. So I do maybe a little understand why he's so upset, and also the plumbing was out, so he's dealing with all these
Mm-hmm.
hardships that could have been avoided if she kind of had Dan in their lives. Uh, but I never understood if you didn't have him and you had a good support system and you kind of didn't need anything because Karen was always there to support you and give you everything needed, then I don't
Mm-hmm.
think you should be kind of acting out against her just because this dude has more money. But that's just my
Yeah.
opinion.
Well, I would say for this episode, I do want to be probably Deb, a badass, and like I just loved her in this episode. I loved her intro to the show. I don't want to be probably just like Nathan in this episode, apart from
Yeah,
when he's talking to Haley. Like, and I think I wrote this down as a note. Like, the second he's with Haley, he's a great person. He opens up. As soon as she gets out of that car, he goes and buys beer, is driving drunk, crashes Payne's car and is like, peace. Like, I'll just blame it on her if you say anything. So probably Nathan. He's very like all over the
Yeah.
place. And I agree with you. Like other things, I'm like, okay, whatever. It's a lot of Dan's influence. But the car thing, I was like, that's like unacceptable and unforgivable. Like
Yeah.
the next episode is going to be episode 5, Where I End and You Begin. Thank you for joining us today, Jonathan, and we'll
Thanks for
see you
having me.
guys next
Thank you
time.
guys for listening. New episodes every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Catch you next time.
Go ahead, read